The coffee shop smelled of cinnamon and yesterday's rain. Marcus sat in the corner booth, the same one he'd occupied every Thursday afternoon for 3 years, watching strangers live their lives through the fog-stained window. At 72, he'd grown accustomed to invisibility, the way younger people's eyes slid past him, the way conversations stopped rather than included him. His daughter called once a month, duty more than desire. His son had moved to Seattle and sent Christmas cards with generic signatures. He was stirring his third cup of coffee, now cold, when the woman approached his table. She couldn't have been more than 30, with auburn hair pulled into a messy ponytail and paint stains on her jacket. In her trembling hands, she held a photograph so faded that Marcus had to squint to make out its details. But it was the look in her eyes, something between hope and heartbreak, that made him set down his spoon. "I'm sorry to bother you," she said, her voice catching, "but I think you might be able to help me understand something I've been searching for my entire life." Marcus gestured to the empty seat across from him. His curiosity piqued for the first time in months. The woman sat down carefully, as if the slightest movement might shatter whatever fragile courage had brought her to his table. She placed the photograph face down on the scratched wooden surface between them. "My name is Sarah," she began. "3 weeks ago, my grandmother passed away. While cleaning out her apartment, I found this hidden in a book she'd kept locked in her desk drawer. I've never seen it before. She never mentioned it. But when I read what's written on the back," she paused, pressing her fingers to her lips, "I had to find the people in this picture. I had to know." Marcus felt something stir in his chest, a feeling he'd almost forgotten, the sensation of mattering. "Why me?" he asked gently. Sarah looked at him with those earnest eyes. "I've been showing this photo to older people in every coffee shop, library, and community center in this city for 2 weeks. Something about you. When I walked in and saw you sitting here, I just knew I had to try." She slid the photograph across the table, image side up first. Marcus picked it up with weathered hands that had once been steady, once been purposeful. The photo showed 2 young men in military uniforms, arms around each other's shoulders, grinning at the camera with the invincibility of youth. Behind them, a small Korean village stretched toward distant mountains. Marcus's breath caught. The world tilted. "That's impossible," he whispered. The young man on the left was him, 50 years younger, a lifetime braver, standing next to his best friend, James Whitmore. They'd enlisted together, fought together, survived together. James had been the brother Marcus never had, the one person who understood what it meant to come home from a war that never really ended in your mind. Sarah leaned forward, her voice urgent with emotion. "You know them? You're one of them?" Marcus couldn't speak. His hands shook as he turned the photograph over. The handwriting on the back was feminine. Careful, each letter formed with obvious love. "To the 2 soldiers who saved my life on March 15th, 1951, you carried me 6 miles through enemy territory when I was wounded. You gave me your rations when I had nothing. You protected me when the world was falling apart. I was 17, terrified and certain I would die. Because of your kindness, I lived. I got married. I had children. I built a life. You are the reason my heart kept beating. I never learned your names, but I never forgot your faces. Thank you for showing me that even in darkness, humanity survives. With eternal gratitude, Sun-hee." Marcus felt tears streaming down his face before he realized he was crying. The coffee shop blurred around him. Sarah reached across the table and grasped his hand. "She was your grandmother?" Marcus managed to ask. Sarah nodded, her own tears falling freely. "She came to America in 1953. She married my grandfather, had 3 children, lived to be 89. She was the kindest person I ever knew, always volunteering, always helping others, always telling us that life was a gift she'd almost lost." Her voice broke. "I never knew why she said that. She never talked about the war. But this photo was obviously precious to her. She kept it hidden, protected for 70 years. Marcus stared at the faded image, memories flooding back with devastating clarity. The girl had been barely more than a child, caught in crossfire between retreating North Korean forces and advancing UN troops. She'd been hit in the shoulder, bleeding badly, abandoned by villagers fleeing for their lives. He and James had been on patrol, low on supplies themselves, already exhausted from weeks of relentless combat. They should have left her. Their orders were clear. Maintain position. Don't engage with civilians. Don't compromise the mission. But James had looked at him, and without a word, they'd both known what they had to do. They'd fashioned a stretcher from their jackets and rifles, taken turns carrying her through mountains, crawling with enemy soldiers, shared their last food, risked their lives at every checkpoint and river crossing. They'd gotten her to a field hospital just as infection was setting in. A doctor had told them she'd survive. They'd never seen her again, never learned her name, never knew if she'd truly made it. Within a week, they were back on the front lines, and the girl became just another moment in a war, filled with moments they tried to forget. 6 months later, James had been killed by a sniper. Marcus came home carrying guilt that his best friend hadn't. He'd built a life, married, raised children, worked as an accountant, but part of him had remained frozen in that Korean winter, wondering if any of it had mattered. "He died," Marcus said quietly, pointing to James in the photograph. "He was the best man I ever knew. We saved her together, but he didn't make it home." Sarah squeezed his hand tighter. "Tell me about him, please. I want to know about both of you." So Marcus told her. In that coffee shop, with the afternoon light fading to evening, he talked about James, his terrible jokes, his faith in human goodness, his courage that never wavered. He talked about the war they'd fought, the choices they'd made, the young girl they'd refused to abandon. He talked about coming home to a country that didn't want to hear war stories, about building a life while carrying ghosts, about wondering if the things he'd done had any meaning at all. Sarah listened like every word mattered, which somehow made them matter more. "My grandmother lived for 70 extra years. Because of you," she said when he finally fell silent. "She taught kindergarten for 40 years. She helped hundreds of children learn to read, to dream, to believe in kindness. She volunteered at a homeless shelter every Sunday. She took in foster children. She created ripples of goodness that spread through so many lives." Sarah's voice strengthened with passion. "And I'm here, me, her granddaughter, because you and James made an impossible choice on one cold day in 1951. My sister is here. My cousins are here. The thousands of people my grandmother touched are here. All because 2 soldiers decided that one life mattered more than orders or safety or war." Marcus felt something breaking open inside him, some calcified wound he'd carried for 50 years. "I thought we'd just delayed the inevitable. I thought maybe she died anyway, and we'd risked everything for nothing." "She lived," Sarah said fiercely. "She lived fully, joyfully, gratefully. And she never forgot you. She carried your gift with her every single day." Sarah reached into her bag and pulled out a worn journal. "She wrote about you near the end. She didn't know your names, but she wrote, 'I hope the soldiers who saved me lived long, happy lives. I hope they knew that their kindness changed the world. I hope they understood that humanity's greatest power is the choice to care when caring costs us everything.'" Marcus covered his face with his hands and wept. For James, for the years of wondering, for the girl who became a woman who became a grandmother, for the beautiful, impossible way that one moment of compassion had echoed through decades. When he finally looked up, Sarah was holding out something else, a small watercolor painting of 2 soldiers, carrying a wounded girl toward distant mountains, light breaking through storm clouds above them. "She painted this," Sarah said. "It's yours now," along with her gratitude, "and mine and everyone who exists, because you chose kindness when the world was choosing violence." Marcus took the painting with shaking hands. In the image, he could see what Sun-hee had seen. Not warriors, but humans refusing to let darkness win. As he and Sarah sat together in the gathering dusk, strangers who'd become connected across generations by a single act of selflessness, Marcus finally understood what he'd been searching for in 3 years of solitary. Thursday afternoons, not invisibility's peace, but proof that his life had mattered. Sometimes the smallest choices create the largest legacies. Sometimes saving one person saves the world. And sometimes, 70 years later, a faded photograph carries a message powerful, enough to heal wounds we didn't know we still carried, the breathless recognition that our humanity, our willingness to care, our refusal to abandon each other even in our darkest moments, is the only thing that ever really saves us